Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the National Press Club, to those who are here as well as those on the live stream. I'm Eileen O'Reilly. I am a managing editor of standards and training at Axios and the 116th president of the National Press Club. Last summer, when I was vice president, I attended the club's awards dinner where our president, Jenin, made a special presentation to honor veteran Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh. Jen honored Shireen with the President's Award that evening in a moving and powerful speech, and one that pointed out Shireen had learned over 15 years in the field how to keep safe while covering news in risky areas. She wore her vest marked press and her helmet and followed all of the safety protocols that meant she should have been safe. But she was killed exactly 1 year ago today. And great pain was felt that day in the hearts of her family and across the region and across the world. Jen stressed that we must have a fair and impartial investigation into what had happened, and that is something we are still waiting for 1 year later. Saying the shot came from the direction of the Israeli Defense Forces or that there was no intent is not justice. An investigation will keep Shireen's killing from having been with impunity. This is an important principle. We do not want to live in a world where a journalist like Shireen, who devoted her career to the public good, is killed without any accounting or explanation. In that world, the killing of journalists can and will continue, and that is not acceptable. Journalism, the kind practiced by Shireen, is something that is needed so desperately in the world. We are here today to support journalism and to support Shireen. That support takes several forms. The day Shireen was killed, we had an event here in the club that included a moment of silence. We joined together with our colleagues at Al Jazeera and tried to help them bear their pain. We placed a picture of Shireen on the big screen in our lobby with her name and dates. She is still there 1 year later. She is there 24/7. When people visit the National Press Club, they see her, honor her memory, and wonder what happened. We wonder that too. Every day we gather here, every day we wonder this. And we gather here today, 1 year on, to ask that question once again and to hear from the people who knew Shireen or are working and pushing for further investigation. Justice takes time, but this has been too much time, and Shireen must have justice. Her family must have justice, the profession must have justice, and because Shireen was a U.S. citizen in the most profound way, this country must also have justice. I am now going to ask our friend and Press Club member, Abderrahim Foukara, to say a few words. Abderrahim is the Washington bureau chief for Al Jazeera. Like many of you, he knew Shireen. They spent time in the field together. They were teammates. I know he feels her loss deeply. Please join me in welcoming him to the National Press Club.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you everyone for joining us at this event in this very important venue, the National Press Club, which, as we all know, is symbolically located for press freedom between the Congress and the White House. 366 days ago, Shireen Abu Akleh was still alive. 365 days ago, Shireen was killed. 365 days have elapsed, and there's still no justice for killing Shireen Abu Akleh, and there's still impunity for those or that who may have been responsible for the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh 365 days ago. The United States remains a beacon on the hill for press freedom, despite all the challenges that the media and the media system face in this country. A lot of people around the world continue to look up to the example of the United States in terms of caring about press freedom and in terms of bringing justice to those journalists, our colleagues, who've been killed while doing their job around the world. While we are honoring Shireen Abu Akleh today and reiterating the call for justice for her, we obviously remember others who have been killed or who continue to face ordeals. Some of them, like Shireen Abu Akleh, are American. Austin Tice, Ivan Gerskovich, held in Moscow, James Foley, beheaded in Syria, and the list goes on and on. And to the extent that people continue to look at the United States as a beacon of press freedom, and to the extent that President Biden spoke the very strong words that he did speak a few days ago at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, that he will vociferously pursue press freedom for journalists, and that he will work tirelessly to bring back American journalists like Ivan and like Austin Tice, the world, not just Shireen Abu Akleh's family or Al Jazeera, the whole world expected him to say also that he will work vociferously to bring about justice for another American citizen, Shireen Abu Akleh. So, in conclusion, we obviously are all here to honor the memory of Shireen Abu Akleh, to reiterate the need for accountability for the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh and any other journalist around the globe. We are also here to hail the example of the United States in terms of global perception of it as a leader of press freedom, despite all the challenges that American journalists and the American media may face here at home. So once again, thank you all very much for joining us on this very important occasion, which, one more time, is not just about Shireen, although Shireen's case is a very, very important one. It is about all our colleagues in the profession who may have been killed or who continue to face harassment and detention without justice. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for those inspiring words. It's so true how important it is for press freedom for everyone. Now we will hear from Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, who is sharing a video message with us today as he has duties on the Hill that keep him from attending. Senator Van Hollen has been one of the most outspoken advocates for Shireen on Capitol Hill. He will tell us about the status of the investigations being conducted by the U.S. and about some of the things he's doing to press for action. Let's listen now.
Today, we gather to mark the solemn one-year anniversary of the shooting death of Shireen Abu Akleh while she was reporting from the West Bank. We also come together to demand accountability. Shireen was an extraordinary journalist. She was also a daughter, a sister, an aunt. She remains profoundly loved by her friends and family and is deeply missed. Shireen Abu Akleh was also an American citizen. And as President Biden recently made clear at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, we have a duty to protect American citizens around the world. And as he said, we have a duty to help protect journalists who work to present the facts and report the truth. That's why we must not rest until we get all the facts about the killing of Ms. Akleh. We must get the whole truth, and we must insist on accountability. In the aftermath of the shooting death of Ms. Akleh, Secretary of State Blinken called for an official, independent, and transparent investigation. That has not happened to date. He and President Biden also called for accountability. Earlier this week, a senior State Department official acknowledged that has not happened yet. What we have seen is a series of important reports from investigative journalists, outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, and Al Jazeera, that have revealed inconsistencies in the IDF's report about the circumstances of her death. And these reports have shown why it is important that we continue to press for an independent, official investigation. And while I was pleased to hear that the FBI is investigating her death, we don't know where that investigation stands. Over the last year, we have fought to ensure accountability in Shireen's shooting death, and we won't stop until the full truth is known and justice is done. Recently, the U.S. Security Coordinator for Israel and the Palestinian Authority completed a summation report on the shooting death of Shireen Abu Akleh. I should stress that this report is not the result of an independent investigation, but I have insisted that the Congress receive the full, unedited version of the report, and I have been assured that will happen soon. But that is not the end of the story, because that report will not provide for the accountability that many of us, including President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken, have called for. We have an American citizen and a respected journalist who was killed in the line of duty, reporting on the facts in a conflict zone. 1 year after Shireen's death, her family deserves accountability. 1 year after her death, the United States must continue to press for accountability. And 1 year after her death, journalists have a duty to continue to pursue the truth and the facts. Many people would like us to stop asking questions, but we cannot and will not let the shooting death of Shireen Abu Akleh be swept under the rug. I would like to thank the National Press Club for organizing this event and thank those reporters who continue to shine a light both on the life and the shooting death of Shireen Abu Akleh, and for continuing to demand answers.
Thanks to Senator Van Hollen and his office who put that together. We are going to return to questions later, and we will take down what questions you have for the senator on these cards, and we will forward them to him. As for broadcasters, I believe we can get you that video to use if you want. Now we will hear from Shireen's niece, Lina Abu Akleh. When we met Lina last year, she was just beginning her role as a family spokesperson, which she continues to do with great poise today. Time magazine, by the way, named her one of its Time 100 Next list for 2022. I believe she's in Ramallah, but she knew we were gathering and wanted to share her thoughts. So here is a video to listen to now.
Hi everyone, this is Lina Abu Akleh. I'm Shireen Abu Akleh's niece. I just wanted to thank you all for being here. It's unfortunate that I'm not there in person, but I just wanted to send out this quick message to you all and say I'm very grateful for your support, especially the National Press Club. I just wanted to say that it's been a devastating year for our family, for Shireen's colleagues at Al Jazeera and the entire community of journalists around the world. Shireen was killed a year ago by an Israeli soldier while she was on duty in Jenin, covering an Israeli military raid. Ever since then, our entire lives have changed forever. That one bullet that killed her has left an entire hole in our lives. It changed our lives forever. And ever since then, we still haven't seen justice served. Accountability for us means action, and we still have yet to see that. It's really important that we continue to call for justice for Shireen, because journalism is not a crime, and a threat to journalists anywhere is a threat to journalists everywhere. That's why, as a family, we hope that you continue to support us by writing about Shireen, talking about her, and calling for justice. Again, thank you all, and we appreciate your support as a family.
Thanks, Lina, and thanks to you all. Now, if you have any questions about what you've heard, please let us know. We will try our best to answer or to get those questions to the speakers who join us via video. Oops. Do you want to, can we use this? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, she's got the microphone. If anybody has a question.
So the Biden administration says that it is calling by accountability by urging Israel to change its rules of engagement. Does that amount to accountability, this call about rules of engagement?
Yeah, do you want to, yeah.
Or do you want to say anything? I mean, I'm Bill McCarran, I'm the executive director here. It's not enough. It's not enough. But for there to be nothing, which is where we are now, that is unacceptable. There must be steps. People working in the field, Americans, Palestinians, even Israeli press, people in the field are in danger unless the rules of engagement are changed. So yes, I think we want that. We want more. I think Senator Van Hollen's answer is good. We want a full accounting. We must know the truth. I think that's, we don't really have a position, right? We're not a policymaker, but that's what if you're asking what we'd like to see, that's what we'd like. Yes.
If I may just add a quick comment to what Bill has just said now. The United States is obviously a world leader. Its word counts. What it says or does or does not do matters, not just to Americans, but to everyone globally. And it seems to me that with regard to this point that you've just raised, the position of the Biden administration has been that it will force, so to speak, the Israelis to change their rules of engagement so that another Shireen Abu Akleh case does not happen, which is good if that happens. Up to this point, we don't know if that's actually going to happen in reality. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, as I said earlier, perception is very important. And the perception that a lot of people are getting from the administration, a lot of people, including at Al Jazeera, is that there's ambiguity in the position, saying that you will force the Israeli military to change its rules of engagement does not absolve you of the responsibility to seek justice for the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh or any other journalist. But since we're talking about Shireen Abu Akleh, who happens to be an American citizen, that's obviously where the focus is. So it's important for the perception of the United States globally that it doesn't come across as speaking out of both sides of its mouth. Changing the rules of engagement does not mean accountability in the ears of a lot of people. That's what the administration seems to be saying, changing the rules of engagement almost as a surrogate for seeking accountability for the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh. If that's the message, then it's a very confusing message for journalists everywhere and for global audiences everywhere. So at the same time that people are asking for justice for Shireen, they're also asking for a clearer position from the Biden administration.
I'm not as familiar with this case as I should be, but has the press club made representation directly to the Israelis or to Israeli pressure organizations, IPAC, and a number of others, to get their response to this and to put them in the position of having to answer for this? I'm not confident about what the U.S. administration is doing, but I wonder if you've exercised this kind of pressure. Thank you.
Our statements are directly to everybody, so we don't reach out, to specific organizations, but we do call for accountability. Accountability for what happened to her.
Did you say you sent a letter?
We send out statements and make press statements. And
What good will they do? I mean, can you increase the pressure?
what do you suggest?
Well, I'm just a poor member. I would suggest that that you meet them and that you forcefully present the case as opposed to letters, which can be easily ignored or answered with pro forma responses. As a press club member, I second that.
Sure. So the press club as an organization can advocate, does not lobby, right? So whether we have a meeting or not might not ever be anything we say in a forum like this, but
Right.
we appreciate your comment.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the National Press Club for hosting this event. Of course, it is very important to remember our friend and colleague, Shireen Abu Akleh. I have two questions. The first one is, are we seeing a regression in the level of commitment towards press freedom in the U.S. vis-a-vis pragmatism when it comes to the allies in the region? And that actually ties to the second question, which is, from Jamal Khashoggi to Shireen Abu Akleh to our colleagues in Al Jazeera Mubashir who are still in prison right now, are there any steps that the National Press Club can take to address these issues with the administration, or do you feel that your role is limited to advocacy, as you just said? And on the other side, what are we supposed to do as journalists who are working in Washington, D.C. or in the U.S. in general? Thank you so much.
Of course. So yes, we are of course very concerned about press freedom issues in the United States. We're constantly, tracking journalists who are facing trouble, addressing problems we might see anywhere in the United States. As far as, what was your second question? Sorry.
When it comes to the press freedom and the journalists who are being jailed or killed at this moment, is there a fundamental applicable rule played by National Press Club towards or to address these issues with the government? That's one question, one side of the question. The other one is, okay, so what can we do as journalists to help them?
Well, as Bill mentioned, we do not lobby for certain things, but we do constantly have conversations, whether it's directly at a podium or indirectly perhaps that we don't talk about. But we are constantly, I think as a journalist, it's up to us to constantly talk about what's happening, raise the issue, speak people's names, and remind people what happened, what is happening now, what still needs to happen. So that is definitely our role, to constantly push for those.
Can I add one quick?
Yeah, of course.
So I don't know exactly the date, but it was about a month ago. We put out a statement calling for the need to prioritize the cases of journalists who are held hostage. And we mentioned both Evan and I think we mentioned several specific journalists at that time, but it was right around the time Evan was taken. The number of those being held is, growing, right? So, and it seems to be a problem that they are not set up well to counter. So the letter was countersigned by 22 different journalism organizations. We just asked a lot of people, and this kind of goes to what Don was saying, and those people agreed to sign on. And that has led to some conversations with government. Obviously they're hearing us. They're hearing what Eileen is saying, is that we think, they're not doing as much as they can. There's some practical things that they can do. Right now it took 13 days to say publicly that Evan Gershkovich was wrongfully detained. I mean, the whole world knew he was wrongfully detained. It took our government's process 13 days to take place. That kind of stuff needs to be fixed. I'd say that's kind of like saying we want a change in rules of engagement for Shireen's case. These are good things to do, but they're not solutions. And I would say what you can do in the press is, it's very hard for journalists. They don't want to cover themselves, right? They don't want to be the story, and I get that. But absolutely, we need to be covering what's happening or what's not happening in Shireen's case. And we need to be covering what's happening in Evan's case and Austin Tice's case. It's a big deal. This is important. Abdul's point that this is what America is supposed to be, is an example to the rest of the world of how to maintain freedom and protection for their press. So that if you're a democracy, you need that inflow of information to function, right? We can't run the kind of government we have without a free press. It's essential that it be protected. There's a couple.
Thank you so much for hosting this event and also for having Shireen's picture in the lobby for the past year. We're so grateful for your support. I was just wondering, as a journalist myself, as an American, I do see a bit of a discrepancy in the way that my field and my colleagues have reacted to Evan's arrest and detention in Russia and some of the apathy we see in terms of the reaction to Shireen's killing. And I was wondering what we can do to make our colleagues care more about her case.
I think it's just important to remind people and constantly talk about her. I was surprised. I went to a press freedom event in New York, and people were talking about Evan, and they had forgotten about Shireen and Austin Tice. And these types of, it's always important to remind people that, there's many journalists out there facing danger and ones who still need accountability as to what happened to them. So I know it seems like a kind of lame answer, but I think it's important. This is our power as journalists, is to remind people, bring them the information, keep asking questions, and hold, the administrations accountable. So that's our power.
Thank you so much for also continuing to highlight a year later what happened to Shireen. I'm going to piggyback off of Leila's question and ask for both of yours assessment of the way in which other press organizations, especially here locally in DC, have been responding to or trying to hold any sense of accountability and justice as well for Shireen in particular. I'm really curious as to what your assessment of all of that has been.
Yeah.
I can take it.
Okay.
Let me do something and then I'll give it to you guys. So this is a hard one. So you see Evan in a glass cage. You see that picture, okay? You can't see, for example, Austin Tice, right? We can't see Shireen, right? So there is a optical difference on how those cases present, right? That's not to say prioritization. It's what can people do? The Evan case is on that first 100 days. The first 100 days for Shireen were different than where we are now in terms of response. I will just say we work a lot of these cases together at the club. The death of a colleague should be the most emotive And the biggest rallying point, I'm just going to say sometimes it is not, because people lose what there is they can do, right? They lose the thread, right? With Evan, it's he needs to come home, like Brittany Griner needs to come home. I just think there's a way that feels concrete for people, whereas completing an investigation is not as concrete. And it's a bad answer, but that's the best answer I can give. I'm going to say Eileen and I sat down, met with the Wall Street Journal when this happened. The profession is further along in understanding how to push back on this stuff than it was Jason Rezaian's case in 2015, right? There have been lessons learned. There have been people who've been through some of it and can talk to others about it. So I think they're a big news organization, but they also got a lot of organizational oomph there. So has, Al Jazeera. But I think these things, happen, and then people learn from each other about what can be done and what can be acceptable. The death of a colleague is one of the hardest cases, right, to push. I just want to say Lina, I think, is doing a terrific job, but she's not here. And we see this with Mrs. Tice. She lives in Houston. She has to come here, for things to happen. So there are those kind of aspects baked in. But I think I hear what you're saying. Hey, I know I'm talking, but I would also like to ask one question. I know your time is short. Abderrahim, I was in a room in New York where you were speaking, a CPJ. I want you to, if you could tell people what was going through your head at that time, just to share with the group. There was a big dinner, think like 1,000, 1,200 people, something like that. And one of the things that CPJ was doing was having different members of the media read the names of colleagues who had passed that year. And it's a long list now, It's a long list. It's startling. And I knew several of the people who were reading, and Abderrahim was there, and he came to his list to read, and it was alphabetical, right? And so he was reading the names of the journalists who had died, and one of his names was Shireen's. And I just want him to, if you could just share what that experience was like for you and your Al Jazeera colleagues.
Happy to, although the word happy is, to use it in this particular case, is ironic. I went through, in this event that Bill referenced in New York, the CPJ event, I think I probably read about, all in all, about 40 different names. I didn't know any of those journalists, certainly not personally. But with every name, one thought that that crossed my mind each time is that this could be me, or it could be any of the colleagues that I work with that I know really well, or it could be anywhere of the journalists that I meet in various places in Washington, D.C. or New York. And, to the question, to the issue that you raised, I think we have to admit that we, the community of journalists, we have a problem. We have a huge problem. And that problem is that our thinking is still, we think in terms of silos. Our thinking is still very much ethnocentric. If I'm Arab, of course I'm interested in what happened to Shireen or to other Palestinian journalists who were killed, or other journalists who are going through ordeals in other parts of the Middle East. How do I make Americans interested in the cases of those journalists, and vice versa? if you're an American journalist, how do you make people in the Middle East or Latin America or Africa really interested and focused on cases such as Austin Tice's or Ivan Gershevich? And, you know, to go back to what you said, one practical way we can think of is just to keep talking about these cases and to keep reminding people of the context in which these cases happened and what the outcome has been. There's obviously no magic wand. Once a problem happens, there's no magic wand to solve it or to prevent it from happening in the first place. But at least when it happens, we need to find the space to keep thinking about these things. And talking about this space, just two quick thoughts. We are very fortunate that we have a forum like the National Press Club where these issues are raised. And the Press Club is easily accessible when these events happen so that we can come here and express these thoughts. And the other, at least for my money, the other advantage that we have in this country is that we can tell the President of the United States, you're not doing a good job, without worrying that somebody is going to come and disappear us at 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's no trifling. That space of freedom to speak and demand is very, very important, and I think we should use it.
Thank you all for coming. Please write, if you have further questions, please write them on the card and we will try to respond. You know, reach out to Senator and Lina if you have other questions as well. Thank you so much.